Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are here with OJ today, and the question is really all to you at this point. So, what is up with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth? Like, I know enough to know. I don't know nothing.
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah,
where'd it come from? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, a lot to cover there, and I know that, originally, if you go back, he's known as different names. So, I mean, we can just start there, of course. His name is Tho or Thought, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But he's also, known as Hermes or Hermes, and Hermes Tres Magistas. In Africa, believe he's also known as Jehudi and Viracocha and, Quetzalcoatl, even Megatron and Enoch, if you want to kind of go down those avenues as well. So, he's been, a so-called, god or really a son of Atlantean. He's originally from Atlantis. So
Okay.
that's where Tho, originates from. His father was Enki. There's a lot of, documented on Enki itself. And yeah, so
Does it? Does it?
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does it? Because I know that. Just as far as Atlantis goes, does it give any sort of location data? Like, does that come up in there or not, or is it just sort of
Yeah.
name him as where he's from?
Well, so it goes from Atlantean being from Atlantis, as you know, there is the infamous round city that it's in the Atlantic Ocean, but really and truly, it was a Atlantean civilization that was interplanetary. So this civilization was like amongst different planets. So it was a huge civilization, and really it stemmed from the Anunnaki, if you're familiar with that origin.
Yes.
So that's essentially where they're from. And Anunnaki basically means you're from another planet. It's like if we were to visit Mars, we wouldn't say we were from Austin, Texas, right? We would say we're Earthlings, right? We wouldn't say necessarily what state we're from. So kind of similar to Anunnaki. So that's where they originated from. And then you can peel back the onion even from there and go back to where, the Pleiadians are Pleiadians there with the Lemurians and the Aborigines. So it even goes back further than that. But so essentially, to kind of bring it all together, the Emerald Tablets is basically something that he wrote. And so that's now been transcribed, and you can actually access that. It was actually depicted, I believe, it was called the Emerald Tablets. You can look it up. In fact, it's now converted in over 1,000 languages. So it's really good stuff.
Do we know what language the tablet was written in? Like what's actually on the tablet itself?
So I know with that, I want to know it was. Let me see here. What I have. Gosh, it's gosh, I'm drawing a blank here for what I'm looking for.
It's all good.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, but just I'll get back to that there because I have it written down.
That's fine.
I'll kind of get to that here in a bit there, Bill. But yeah, so basically, the Emerald Tablets talks about how Atlantis fell. All that happened as we all know, and they basically kickstarted a new civilization in the land of Chem. Where he ruled for at least about what they say now 16,000 years, or according to the Emerald Tablets.
And how do you where in the land of, you said Kim?
In the land of Kim, which is currently now Egypt.
Is that Kemet as well? Is that
Kemet,
the same?
Kemet. You're exactly correct, Daniel.
Okay.
You're exactly correct. Yeah. So it's all the same place. Yeah, pro-Egypt, yes.
Or proto-Egypt, like the... Okay, cool.
Yeah. And so just real quick on Tho before I kind of get on to all the Egyptian stuff there. And I'm just kind of now learning about him as well. But he's basically depicted as because it's so esoteric. He's basically depicted as like an ibis. I know some, like in Babylonian times, it's depicted as like a baboon, but
Mm-hmm.
in most, whenever you do Google it, it depicts an iris or an ibis, which is like kind of those long, skinny, beaked birds, if you've ever seen
Mm-hmm.
them.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's
and
kind of
it's it's basically depicting it with the ability to try to grab light and deep into darkness to try to grab that light and bring it out. So that's where the
Mm-hmm.
whole though and the depiction of that ibis comes from, because as we know, he's the god of knowledge, right? So in that is all of the natural sciences, which kind of led me to go
So
really deep into
this
though.
is the Prometheus story then, essentially,
Essentially,
of bringing
yes.
the light out and giving knowledge to the. It's that same
That's exactly
it's
it.
that
That's
same
exactly it,
the
Johnny.
repetition.
It's
same
the
Okay.
same
mythos.
Prometheus. Yeah, the
Yeah.
same
Okay.
mythos, and you can see it not just in that, but you can see it transcribed
Yeah.
through
It
different
repeats all.
languages. It just repeats.
Yeah.
So
It
So
repeats
so
all
that's
over
what
the
I
place.
found very intriguing. Hmm.
very similar to like the Quetzalcoatl myths in
Mm-hmm.
Mesoamerica, bringing like knowledge and mathematics and all of that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Which I can definitely get into, which is going to segue us right into that Mesoamerica stuff.
Yeah. Go for it.
But yeah, so in there he was pretty much the god of all natural sciences. He was the god of weight. He found out measurement. He found out all these crazy things that they back then thought was magic. But for what we understood, according to like the Kabbalion, which is a book I highly recommend, according to the Emerald Tablets, it was just advanced technology. It wasn't magic, it was advanced technology. So
and
it talks
it's
about,
I was just going to say it's interesting on that because I don't know if you saw in the news, but I just found an article where they found advanced Pythagorean theorem on
No, no, no. So
it was it was
applied
applied
wow,
geometry. That's right,
geometry
on Babylonian tablets
a
before
thousand years before
Pythagoras.
Pythagoras.
So, and the only reason I mention that is we're constantly finding out we're wrong with some of the assumptions, and not in a malicious way. We just didn't
mhm,
have that data set, and now we have a new data set, and it's pushed
exactly,
stuff back. So,
exactly,
sorry, I
bro.
didn't mean to
And
interrupt, but that was just fascinating
no,
that we're talking
and
about this, and I
I was
just saw
thinking
that
the
like
same thing.
yesterday. Yeah.
And I can piggyback on some of that Babylonian stuff with the god of Murdoch, which we all know it was the brother of Thoth, which we all know was also called Amun Ra. So there's a whole component of that which we'll dive into that basically talks about the whole deconstruction of polytheism into monotheism from singular gods to one singular or to the plural gods to one singular god, uppercase. So there's that whole component of it, right? Where we're then at that point, though, then goes from Egypt and then he goes to Mesoamerica to kick off the Tijiniqua whole thing with the pyramids and all that whole thing. So that's that whole thing in Mesoamerica with the Tijiniqua.
So
But yeah,
now is this at this point pre or post Younger Dryas flood at this point? Because I know they clarified that in the King's List. So where are we
yeah,
here?
good question. So
Okay.
basically, what happened, kind of I know we kind of got off track there, but from
Yeah,
what
it's all good.
from what we understand, I know that his purpose was to serve others, and his dad Inkley basically said, let us give you a mission to raise civilization to a higher level of consciousness." And the job was given to him specifically after the Great Flood, which happened about 36,000 years ago. So he specifically gave him this job, Inky did, to raise civilization to a higher level of consciousness right after the flood. And we
So
all know
that's got to
this,
be a different. That's got to be a different flood then.
right? So we're talking about a
So
flood that
that's got to
happened
be
over
the cycle
36,000 years ago.
before. Okay.
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
what really drew my attention to saying, okay, well, these Emerald Tablets, okay, go back according to like if you're familiar with the Enuma Elish and those
Yeah.
Babylonian tablets, right? Which we can go into
Right.
those 7 clay tablets. So all of this stuff is just coming from this old ancient information that we now know of that's now just saying, okay, well, we have to peel back this onion and go back now 36,000 years to see what really went on. Uh, and it's really mind blowing. There's a lot of stuff in there. And it talks about him jump starting civilization around 36,000 years ago across all four corners of the map, which talks about all the just the mathematics that are just involved in the pyramids. In my personal opinion,
so, have you watched BAM, Builders of Ancient something? I can't quite. I think it's so. If you look it up on
Builders of Ancient Man, I think is what it is.
Something like that. I don't remember. There's BAM
Okay.
and there's BAM 2.
Yeah.
They're both on YouTube. If you search for them, BAM, big capital letters, they'll pop up for you.
Yeah.
They go into all that math in the pyramids. They get into a bunch of the other locations that have crazy math as well. If you haven't checked it out, it's totally worth your time. Yeah, they're real good.
Just from encoding just the location of where we're at from just the Earth to around the sun, the calculation of the distance from the moon to the Earth. I mean, it's just all crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's all in there. And the math also coordinates. I mean, and here's where it gets fun: when the math coordinates with the moon as well, and you start starting to question why it's the right distance and the right size, and you know, it's a little odd.
And that's what really. Being just a philomath myself, I'm just a lover to learn, and just having that bachelor's in science while I ran around the horn, and I actually studied, and this is a whole nother podcast, but I was telling Daniel offline when we were talking about I think those other Babylonian things, but science, and this is what led me all the way to Thoth, which I said was basically math. Advanced math is geometry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Applied geometry is physics. Applied physics is chemistry. Applied chemistry is biology. Applied biology is psychology. Applied psychology is sociology. And then applied sociology is philosophy. And then applied philosophy leads you back to mathematics. So that circle of science now has brought me to this more of this esoteric religious belief of this consciousness, which we can understand now that which the pyramids told us as well, that I believe that consciousness grows the universe. Well, first of all, 13.5 billion years of data can be stored in one human body, which is the current age of the universe, right? And we also know
that it's not anymore.
Not anymore.
Nope, it's 26.7 now.
26.7.
Not debunked.
Well, it's interesting. 26.7 right now, and this might be old information, but the universe is expanding.
This just changed in the last
this is
couple of months.
A new data point that
new.
I think came out of that new telescope. Yeah,
James Webb telescope.
Oh, okay. So now. Is it true now that the universe is still expanding at the speed of light, or has that now been debunked?
No. That is still.
I don't think that changed. No. It's not that. It's something. Is it moving? It's moving faster than we thought it was.
So,
it didn't. I don't think it changed the constant. I think the constant is the same. I think it's just it just started earlier.
Light is still moving at the fixed pace that we know, but
yes.
As we reach the edge of what we can see in the known universe and the remnants of the Big Bang, and they talk about that. I mean, Hawking. I tried to read Hawking's book, but he talks about some of this stuff too. That the physics we understand gets a little mushy and different, and so there's some fuzziness there. Because there was a point where like matter and energy weren't different things, and so there's at that very edge stuff may be somewhat different, but we thought we were seeing the edge, and now, and I'm going to tangent for 2 seconds here.
No, you're fine.
We thought we knew what was there, and then we launched Hubble, and we pointed Hubble at an empty spot of space and saw galaxies we had no idea were there. And then we've launched the Webb, and it's now seeing twice as far out. So again, I don't think I don't fall into the conspiracy theory of the science isn't trying to tell us. Is that we're just finding new data points as the instrumentation is getting better.
Well, I think the idea that I think is more true. I find more and more true every day is what Graham Hancock says, which is we're a civilization with amnesia, and we've forgotten something, whether it was intentionally or whether someone tried to do it on purpose and erase some history. Who knows? But we've forgotten something, and we're starting to remember. I think we're also starting to realize that the stories that we were all told were myth are actually a little more true than we think we care to think they are.
Yeah, and that also, just to piggyback on what you're saying, Daniel, is that some of the gods intentionally wanted to spread the truth around through religion and hiding the truth and having us really decipher it through whether it's secret societies or whatnot. And, we can talk about how, there is like tons of wars. The Bible talks about that. And the fact is that there was a lot of stuff done with even talk about with the telomeres. Where one of the gods went in there biologically and DNA chromosome number 2. Okay, they added telomeres, and I know this from biology, and that's the only chromosome, number 2, where they have telomeres. So basically, telomeres is once your telomere, which are the tiny tips of the chromosomes, run out, you're basically, life is now at that point, you're dead. The soul is no longer, or the corpse is dead. So we all know that, and now through, again, the Kabbalion Emerald Tablets, a lot the Enuma Elish, we know now that was put there through, Amun-Ra, one of those gods, who put that along with other bad characteristics, because there was a race to try to conquer human civilization, and all of the Emerald Tablets go into that,
So I'd just like to touch on one little tiny thing, a clarification of definition. We're talking about gods here, little g, and for people who haven't really studied theology, those are what we consider like divine, semi-divine, proto-divine, or extraordinary beings that were worshipped, as opposed to the like modern religions that are worshiping like the big G God, which is this more less understanding thing, and what I think I've talked about this on one of the podcasts, or maybe I haven't, but having a background, it's funny, your background's in science, my background's in theology, and one of the things that I like to do when we sit down, we're going to have a discussion about religion or gods or whatever, is all right, let's start with the definition of that big G God. Is this is something so profound that the human mind can't actually fully comprehend, right? By its very definition, we're all going to be wrong in some way, shape, or form. We're limited. And then we have these other things which we can put more stronger definitions on, like the Zeus, the Thor, I'm blanking on the Egyptian names, but anyway, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Ra,
and yeah.
Osiris.
That was the one I was thinking of.
Osiris.
Isis,
and Bill, you're absolutely right. I mean, these are just so esoteric. Like we talked about, Thoth not even having a picture. I mean, these are they used to back then depict old souls or these spirits with these animal heads, right? Because they're so esoteric that we don't even have pictures of these individuals. And so now that we're just finding this information, it's just now new to us. It's on the forefront. And I have, I don't know if I'll remember, but around the 20th century, there's kind of a bit of like a mini renaissance from I think the turn of the century to like the 1929, around the crash. There was advancements in physics. There was advancements in art. I don't know if you looked into like the work of like Elena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, these old school esoteric. Yeah,
it's fascinating that you say that, because I was watching a news clip today from the Breaking Points thing, and they were talking about advancements in technology. And they said if you look from that like 1890 to
Correct. So
just
about
after World War
1929.
II. Well, just after World War II, they talk about how there are basically Nobel Prize type discoveries across multiple fields. Like every week, there was
It was
something new coming
right,
out, right? There was this, you're
and
right,
there was a bit of
renaissance of discovery.
it was like there's a bit of a mini renaissance around that time. And what's fascinating about that time, and we have the likes of Graham Hancock talk about this, people like Edward Grant, people that I really, really, really follow, talk about like this is around the same time when the Kabbalion was introduced and the Emerald Tablets were really, really studied. And so it's no coincidence about the time that those discoveries happened and that mini renaissance happened. I mean, and that's where kind of things for me started with the knowledge of Thoth
And
and
so
this
that
gathering.
we're saying between 18, like the
About
late
the
18,
late 19th century.
Turn of the
Yeah,
late.
century.
turn of the
So,
century
and
to
I'm just,
about.
I don't know because I like what kind of things are we talking about here? Because I know we also, because
Mhm.
I also think there's a late 30s to into 40s Renaissance, which we would really want to attribute to the idea of finding UFOs. We've got a lot of like
Oh yeah.
space age technology that pops up. So I was just curious, like
Mhm.
what stuff and in this period of activity were we seeing? Like what fields are we talking about here?
Well, I know definitely advancements in like physics. Uh, that's a
Okay.
huge one. But not just that.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
believe, okay, so like during this time, Daniel, I mean, these individuals that I just named, like for example, like Elena Blavatsky, I think I'm pronouncing that. Rudolf Steiner, Walter Russell. These were all like luminaries. I think some of these people were even coined like the newfound esoteric like knowledge of like advancements of like frequency and like the same
well,
exact stuff that like Tesla was
you've.
into.
I was going to say
Like
you've also got
Yeah.
so,
the Teslas, the Edisons, and
so this is
yeah,
all
Mhm.
going to follow into that specific
and
realm of physics, of quantum physics, and now
shoot
fast forwarding to today,
the
quantum supremacy that we're now currently in. So
the
that's kind of where it
foundations.
all started.
I was going to
Where
say
now where
even
we can now with the whole fractal holographic light matrix to even currently
Mhm.
today where we have the Nobel Prize, which I know we can talk to, well, we can talk about in a different podcast. But what I wanted to let y'all know is let's not forget that local realism, we just realized that the recent Nobel Prize of this year, last year, right, was local
Mhm.
realism is false. Okay, John Klausner was the one in quantum physics, and he proposed that local realism is false. Basically, it's not true.
Mhm.
So we know that now. So this is all to answer your question there, Daniel. Specifically, this is kind of where all that stuff started. Was with these guys that just
Mhm.
named, and these guys were like luminaries. Fast forward to present day, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah. So if that answers a little bit there,
it's
but
kind of fascinating to think that
mhm.
most of the major discoveries in physics happened at the turn of the not the turn of the 21st century, but the turn of the 20th century. Laying the foundations for physics as we know it. And everybody knows who Einstein is, but there's all the other people who
Mhm.
don't. And there were people who were doing research into radiation and radioactivity, and the foundations for the nuclear
Mhm.
bomb were all started in that 1890s to, like you said, the crash. Um,
Right.
all that was happening.
Roughly.
Research was happening in Europe and here and in several different places. Um, it's just I know we've kind of gotten off topic a little bit, but
Yeah.
um, so I have a question.
So
Or go ahead.
oh yeah, you go. You want me to go first,
Yeah,
or you want to
no,
go?
you go ahead and go first.
So the information that we're looking at here, the translations,
Mhm.
these are from the Doriel translations
Right.
that
Correct.
okay.
Doriel's.
Now, what and this they are many are skeptical about the validity of these documents, and so I ask you, why do you feel that they are valid where
Well,
others don't? Put it that way.
well,
Like what?
yeah. So I
Yeah,
know, like, and I'm just gonna go off the top of like let's talk. We all something that we're all
yeah,
familiar with like with Babylonian creation, with the Enuma Elish, right? We all know about that.
right,
So, which is the seven tablets of creation. So we all know that believe that that was discovered by what Austin Henry Layard in like 1849. So that was found in that ruined library in the Shubinal and I think Mosul, India.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I believe that was published by George Smith in 1876. So we know that the Enuma Elish, right, the seven tablets of creation, had about 100 lines recorded in this old Babylonian, uh, these basically seven clay tablets,
right.
each tablet holding about, I think, like 150 to 170 lines, roughly. And they were all in this old cuneiform, archaic, like of script, I think is the
Mm-hmm.
best way of
Right.
Sumerian script, right? So these, and I think on a side note, I think most of tablet five, okay, these seven tablets have, most of tablet five, I believe, Daniel, Bill, I think has not been discovered yet. So we're still like in the initial stages of just deciphering these tablets, right? Which is pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool. But I know that currently you can find the tablets in the I'm going to butcher this, but the Sala Maynaya, we can post it in a link there, the Somalia Museum in Iraq. And what's cool about this is that
Assuming
I
they didn't get
believe,
destroyed.
well,
No, no, no.
no,
I'm not being
that's
facetious.
what,
There was
yeah,
so much
yeah,
stuff
no,
that got destroyed in the invasion of Iraq and all that stuff, and the
yeah,
looting of
I
those
think,
museums. It was
I
criminal.
think that's yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. I think you can go visit them currently today.
Okay,
I
good,
think that
good.
there's professor, yeah. So this stuff, what's cool about this is that I know the, like, for example, the Enuma Elish, and I wanted to record this. I knew that this would be important. It's in the library. Okay, so yeah, so I stand corrected. This is in the library of Ashwaubenon, and it dates back 7 centuries before BCE. 7 centuries. So we know for a fact that this is at least 7 centuries BCE as far as these
Okay.
tablets. It dates back. So they're able to kind of
Right.
carbon date or do whatever they need to do to
Mm-hmm.
confirm that.
Yeah.
So that's been confirmed. So yeah. So if you look through the Enuma Elish, but again, originally I think you had asked what was this written in or how is it transcribed. I believe
Well,
it's a
no.
whole yeah.
What I was asking was
Yeah.
what makes you, so again, this is a book that was, that someone comes out and says, like, hey, I translated this information, this is where I got it from. It's just his account of this, and so I was wondering what
Yeah.
about this is, why do you believe that he's not
Yeah.
just
Well,
making it up?
well, yeah. Well, a lot of high-end, whether it's now being taught throughout now all of the huge and biggest universities around the world. I mean,
Mhm.
even people that I follow from, Edward Grant to, Billy Carson to professors
Right.
at Harvard. I mean, this stuff is it's just written and you can find it
Well, no,
anywhere.
but
Yeah.
So this kind of
Yeah.
leads
but
to
I'm,
my
I'm
question. So I think I'm going to be able to clarify a little bit, because, and
Yeah.
I'm going to give an example, and then I'm going to ask a question. One of the major criticisms by most Christian academics of Mormons is, where's the tablets so we can verify, or where's the golden thing that you translated it from to translate the Book of Mormon? Can we see it? And the answer of the Mormon Church is, well, no, we got it, and then the angels took it away. Do we actually have the Emerald Tablet in a museum somewhere that we can?
We
Like,
do.
is the original text, where is it, and where can it go be seen? And then what language is it written in? That's my question, because I did a quick Google search and I couldn't find it, but that doesn't I spent like 5 minutes on it.
No.
So it's like, where's the source material? Because with my background in dead language, I'm a
Yeah.
huge source material person, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
that's usually one of the big criticisms of all this stuff. Is like, where's your source material, right? And if you
No.
can
Yeah.
point to a
That's
source
it.
material, then because a lot of people can debate
And
Zachariah Sitchin and his translations, but at least we know the tablets are all in
right.
the British Museum
Well,
and they're there,
yeah.
right?
And this is, I guess, also deeply, and that's a great point there, Bill. And we can look on that and see it. And I think now they're just transcribed in many databases throughout colleges. Like, for example, like the UC Berkeley now has a full like
Yeah,
transcription
but somebody's
of
got
the
to
whole
have
thing.
the the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thing,
No,
and without the
definitely.
thing, you that's where the
And
question comes in, right?
yeah, and I know a lot
And
of
there
this
and
is
there's
instilled
not.
in, well, and just real
Go
quick,
ahead.
I know a lot of this is instilled in Hermeticism philosophy, the Hermetic
Hmm.
philosophy of the seven principles and the seven universal principles, right? That they go far beyond this conversation, right? So this is all, I guess, stemming from that as well. But no, yeah. So there's definitely a lot to kind of dive in and do research on there, Bill, and we can definitely have a kind of like a follow up, part to that question, because that's a great question in itself, though, Bill. I kind of agree with you. As like, where does all this stuff stem from? Because right
Well, I
now, I
mean, like
believe
physically,
there's over like a, yeah, yeah. Well,
the tablet
I don't
is?
know. Yeah, whether we should. I know it's stored somewhere. I can find
Okay,
it.
okay.
So
So there is a
that's cool.
claim it physically exists.
Yeah,
Somebody could look at it. Academics
yeah, yeah.
could get
Oh, see,
photos of
Yeah,
it, and
my understanding was that
there's
there
just
there
like
is
pieces of
not.
it. There's pieces
okay,
of,
Well, I mean,
and maybe,
there's
yeah.
pieces of the and I say I think there's a bunch of different things here. I think that's sort of why it gets a little confusing, because I think there are tablets that are associated to Thoth that exist,
hmm
that are there are
I think
there is the Enuma Elish, which is the seven tablets
tablets
of
of
creation,
creation.
which is sort of one of the earliest, you know, pseudo biblical,
and then
stories that falls into that. And then the 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 tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, is the is the story that comes from the translations that Doriel got from the tablets that he got from the
Hmm.
White Brotherhood or something like that. That's not right. It's the Brotherhood of the White Castle or something
and
like
then
that, I think.
I
And
I saw
and
something,
then they took those back, was my
and then
understanding.
I saw something today that talked about another emerald tablet that was an alchemical thing that was lost during the Middle Ages, right? So,
Yeah.
Right. So,
which may not have been the same thing, right? But
right.
you start searching for emerald tablet, and it kind of went 5 or 6 different
It
ways.
kind of, yeah. And it doesn't mean what I think is most interesting about this is, and the little bit that I've done and everything that we sort of talked about here. I mean, either it sort of feels like it's one of two things. Either this guy did a spectacularly good job of compiling all of this information and sort of creating this story, or
Hmm.
maybe there is something to this, just because it
Yeah,
touches on a lot of things that it also feels like it touches on things that we may not have known at that time, or
yeah.
connections that
And
were not
to be perfectly
typical.
fair, if
Hmm.
people have money, they get access. And we have talked about how the Smithsonian has warehouses and warehouses and warehouses of stuff that's just not available to the general public. So does the British Museum. I mean, there's a joke. I don't know if you've heard it, OJ.
The Vatican.
What the reason the pyramids are in Egypt is the British couldn't move them into their museum. It was too heavy. That's the only reason
Yeah,
the pyramids are still there, because they have the
right.
capstones. They've got the capstones of
Yeah,
the pyramids in the British Museum,
and
right?
which
Um,
I want to say, if we look hard enough, I believe some of those tablets are in one of those British museums.
well,
But
there are
I'm
just
sure.
just the. Oh, go ahead.
But
Sorry.
yeah, but there are thousands of these tablets now newly
Absolutely.
discovered. So we're just kind of like tipping the iceberg now, and this is all new stuff to me. And this is what I was telling Daniel offline a couple months ago.
Hmm.
Man, I was just excited to know and to have the appreciation to know that someone other than me has an appreciation for Thoth,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just so much new information now that we're just now discovering, and it's just now, for me, bringing this now full circle, like when I talked about the science part of how deep this stuff goes, it's just mind blowing. Uh,
It's
but
it's such a wild idea that it's really hard to like let your brain like go like, so what we're really talking about here is that like 30,000 years ago there was something that was messing with the DNA, and like you have to really like, I mean, it's not the craziest thing I've ever
No.
heard, and like, there's evidence in the DNA that kind of backs that up a little bit, and you're like, boy,
well,
that's weird.
And
right.
to counterpoint that, one of the massive criticisms that has been laid on a lot of, I'm just going to call it the ancient alien theory, right, is that
Yeah.
aliens could never get here. And let us not forget that we just had a hearing where a whistleblower came out and said, we've got 12 things, and we got the first one from Mussolini back in the 30s, and we paid him money, and that's kind of where the fascist states came from. And we have biological stuff that is non-terrestrial.
They recovered. He was very clear,
yeah,
because he said he didn't want to put any origin on it.
Yeah,
So he said
non-human
non-human biologic.
Yeah, we had this idea that that's all just kooky stuff is something that we really have to stop and take a hard look at.
Well,
The other thing is the idea, regardless of whether the Thoth thing is right or wrong or whatever or true or what, if you look back in religions in general, there are stories of powerful things coming from the sky, bringing us information and helping raising us up. And it's almost
right.
universal across all oral
Well,
traditions. So, sorry, I just
yeah.
go ahead.
No, yeah. And just real quick there before, so we're just on this esoteric thing, we can fast forward here, but just, I know that was part of Inky because I know talking esoterically, they say that Thoth ruled for under Hermes for about close to 16,000 years, 19,000 years, 16,000 years. And then he had the ability to raise sound. Not only that, that he had the ability to raise matter from light, or to how the tablets discussed materializing matter from light. So back then, there was a huge fight with Marduk, or Marduk, right, which is the Babylonian god, which at the time was also known as Amun Ra. Okay, which is what during the fight, Inky said, okay, why don't you go separate from Kem now that you've been here for X amount of years, and go set land in a new civilization, which he then kickstarted there in the Tijiniqua. So that's where he kickstarted that. And that's where, if you go and you talk to like old historians there, it wasn't the Mayans that built the pyramids. It was Thoth, under, I think, believe the name Teotihuacan, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, and
So,
we also
yeah.
know that there is effectively a civilization we know nothing about, called the Olmecs, that we know was there before. And
And there are references that Hancock makes that he got in trouble for later, which is ridiculous. But that even in those religions, even in their history, they say, these pale, redheaded people came and taught them all these things.
The Olmecs,
maybe that's what that is.
It's funny that we mentioned the Olmecs because the Emerald Tablets, and again, I just kind of read like a beginner's guide. It talked about the Olmecs, and it talked about how these guys were like stonemasonry, these guys, and these guys helped Thoth, literally help Thoth in making and kickstarting civilization there in Teotihuacan. And so that was a big thing. So the Mayans technically inherited this for the Teotihuacans, which then later the Aztecs inherited from the Mayans. So that's kind of the history there that the Emerald Tablets also dive into. So
which also helps explain why. That all ties into the idea that there was one sort of global. I mean, because all the building is very similar. The way that the buildings are constructed, the iconography is very similar. The handbags appear everywhere. Like, I mean, that all ties together.
And around that same time, I believe, is when Amun-Ra stayed in Egypt, okay? And then he wanted to rearrange all of history. And that's when he wanted to make it difficult. And so they deciphered the truth of multiple gods into monotheism, a singular God. And they literally scraped off. So if you go and see all the hieroglyphs in Egypt, you see all the faces scraped off.
Mm-hmm.
That's because they didn't want to associate with many gods. They wanted one God. So that was kind of where they kind of enrolled that component of it.
Yeah, there's some academics in Christianity and Judaism studies that think that one of the potential sons of the pharaoh at the time who did all that is the foundation for the story of Moses and leading people out, right? Yeah, and so it's not. We don't know for sure, right? But that's because we're getting.
But
into
it all kind of adds.
It does. It all kind of adds up, and one of the more traditional pronunciations of Moses is Moshe, which then leads closer to one of the Egyptian ones. And anyway, it all ties kind of back to that.
And there's a little bit that touches on, and going back to the Emerald Tablets here, it talks about Moses stealing the Ark of the Covenant. And this was all part of Amun-Ra's whole component, which is now present day, like we say, Amen. That's stemming from Amun-Ra, which is also known as the Babylonian god Marduk. Same individual, very powerful, but very evil god. According to old esoteric scriptures, he's very evil. And again, brother to Thoth. So pretty cool stuff, pretty interesting.
Are you familiar at all with the apocryphal book, the book of Giants?
Not that
it's not in the canon. So the Book of Giants is massively fragmented. Like we have pieces, just pieces and pieces and pieces. It's like a word, ... and then a phrase, ... But there's a phrase in there where it says, because you're talking about genetics and all this stuff, where it basically says, and we took the creatures and we crossbred them and made monsters. And you're just like, oh, that sounds like genetic research or crossbreeding or, making a modern chimera, like through genetic research where we're making glow-in-the-dark
even just
mice and stuff.
Even just breeding the Neanderthal and the Homo sapien together to make something better could have made the giant. Well, could have made the giant. Yeah. They made a monster and they had to go back and correct it.
You're exactly right. You're exactly
right.
No,
I joke about the Neanderthal thing because I've got the Neanderthal DNA in my background.
Oh, yeah. So. Yeah. I saw that podcast. Yeah. And there's a whole nother, But
that Book of the Giants thing is just wild. It's just utterly wild and weird. And it's...
Okay, so it says, Chapter 1, the rebellious watchers descend to Earth, bringing secret knowledge and wickedness. Their hybrid offspring are giants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The messengers of Chapter 2, the messengers observe all the creatures on Earth, including human beings. And then it gets to... The messengers choose 200 specimens from each of the variety of creatures on which to perform ungodly acts. Giants, monsters, and corruptions fill the earth as a result of angelic interbreeding.
Yeah, it's just...
I saw, there's an old Reddit picture of a giant back in in the Northeast. Huge giant guy.
We're going to do giants in the Americas at some point. We've got...
we have. That'd be great. One thing I wanted to also touch on real fast, real fast, Bill, that story, are you talking about that's just piece by piece? Are you talking about stuff that didn't make it to the canonized Bible?
Yes. So just the other day, Daniel and I decided we wanted to start reading the non-canonical stuff, and so we found the 52 books that have been collected into a big volume, and it's a combination of chapters that were left out of Daniel and Ruth and then there are just whole books that were, and some of them
Yeah.
are in the Catholic Bible, because a lot of people don't realize the Catholic Bible has more books than the the Protestant Bible, and then there's the stuff that
Hmm.
didn't make it in at all,
Yeah.
anywhere.
Like well, so of course, Book of Enoch's a famous one. How about like the
And a lot of this
Gospel of
stuff comes out
Thomas,
of like Dead Sea Scrolls
Dead Sea
and that.
Scrolls? It's a
Um,
great resource. Oh gosh. So real quick, I mean, just on that topic, did Daniel? I know we chatted offline about briefly about the Gospel of the Holy 12. Do you know anything? Have you looked into that there, little Bill, at all? Have you?
Yes, I did at one point. I remember
I have
talking
not.
about that.
I have not.
Yeah, so that's basically a scripture where it talks about what Jesus did, or an overview of what Jesus' journey from the ages of like 12 to 32,
Hmm.
where he started in Egypt, where he led a shrine in Cairo, teaching like it was like ancient mystery schools where he kind of mastered that stuff, which is pretty interesting. And then
More
from there,
Gnostic.
uh, yeah, so and he lived with his mom, and in fact, in Egypt, you can go and visit the holy home where he lived. I believe that's where it's called. You can take a tour and all that stuff.
Hmm.
It's pretty cool. And then so he lived there with his mom. Then several years later, I believe he went to, well, he did go to Tibet, I believe is the order he went. So he went to Tibet where he studied Qigong mastery, which is pretty cool, and Reiki healing. So pretty
Hmm.
cool stuff. And then once
That's
he
funny,
mastered that,
considering who
yeah,
Is
we've
this the
yeah, and then
had
is
he,
on.
this the one that promotes veganism as well?
uh, I'm sure there
Because I
may
know
be something that in
there's
there that touches on that.
two of them.
That sounds right. I'm just going off the top of the dome here. And then I
Yeah,
know at
yeah. No,
that
I
he
know.
just went to India. I think at the tail end, and where he learned like all the mystic arts and all that cool stuff like
Hmm.
they do in India. And the Dalai Lama has this all recorded, by the way. Like you can go and look at the Akashic records if y'all are familiar with that. There, the Akashic records kind of outline all that cool stuff. So,
So
pretty interesting.
it so which so the Akashic records that I'm familiar with are not a physical thing. They're defined as like a
Hmm.
Yeah,
energy
no, yeah,
field of knowledge
yeah.
that people tap into. So I don't know if
The
that's different than what you're talking about. So
No,
that's
no,
why I'm
no, no.
asking the question.
Yeah, you're referring to the location in India,
No, I'm
because
talking
yeah.
about this
No.
thing that
Okay,
Edgar
so
Casey would go into a trance and he would connect with this
no, so there's actually
ethereal database, for
no.
lack of a better
That's
way
what
to.
I'm
So
familiar with as
so
Yeah.
so
well.
this is like, well, the Dalai. Well, I was referring to the Dalai Lama, but you
Hmm.
can actually so he has record of this. But what I'm talking about is what you can is a gene key. So it's basically a mathematical algorithm. You go somewhere in India, I believe, and you can play. I think the algorithm consists of like your geographic location of where you're located times like your name and gematria plus the time you were born times like the month and year. And so every single individual has a specific gene code or gene key. So that's something in India, but just
Hmm.
off the top, yeah. But yeah, so and everybody has their own specific one. No one has the same uh, gene code or gene key. So that's another kind of new I guess founding in science lately.
Hmm.
You can even look that up, and there's more information on that. Yeah, but there's a specific algorithm. I know Edward Grant, who's like a polymath, real big into the space. He talks about this and goes into depth on it. So there's a lot of information on him on that. So
Yeah, I wrote that name down. I'm gonna check on that one.
yeah.
So
So
okay, so what we're so in the story, I'm kind of lost on the timeline here, because if we're talking about
mhm.
the this leading right into monotheism, Egypt and Moses,
Hmm.
then this stuff is happening
Well
after.
before.
So because because we're talking about a 36,000 year flood, but there's
Mhm.
also then we've got a 9 to 11,000 year flood in there as well, and the Younger Dryads that we now know actually happened. So they've been messing around. Then the flood happened, and then they had to start again. I mean, is that what we're talking about here?
Well,
Yes.
in the
So
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry, my brain just went somewhere.
No. Well, you're exactly correct. So
I
from what we understand is there's
Yeah.
been about seven or eight resets. And
Okay.
again, this
Right.
will segue.
Okay.
This is going to segue us into a whole other podcast, which I'd be more than happy to dive into with you. But
we're going to
the
have to
thing
come back. Yeah.
the thing is that there's well, if you're familiar with the Yuga cycle, so if we go back to the Bronze Era, to the Babylonian, the Bronze Era, I believe we were trying to ascend. We were in a descending age, and so when we talk about how long ago this reset might have been, we're talking about now these recent resets, which I believe we're heading into, according to the Yuga cycle, into kind of an ascension to a higher level of civilization. At one point, we're getting there, which is going to lead to the CIA documents that were just released, which me and Daniel have had a discussion on, that talks about energy and vibrational communication through frequencies, and how we only see 1% of the light matrix. And there's different dimensions that are happening all around us at all at one time, and being able to tap into that, which I've had studied immensely, very, very deep on in the last, I'd say, year, and trying to understand the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere and the alignment of that, and trying to vibrate at a higher frequency. All that documentation with the CIA has just now been released. So, and that's kind of coupled with all this science that's been now released, that's now allowed us to kind of symbiotically tie in this esoteric theology with now scientific backing. And everything that we're talking about now, even, which is a whole nother podcast as well, all of this, what they called so-called magic back then, was really just advanced technology that they were unaware of.
The saying is, any advanced enough technology is effectively magic, right? That I'm bastardizing the saying, but that's been around.
Any significantly advanced technology is considered magic.
Yeah, so I'm preaching to the choir. Y'all guys know what's up.
So I have a question for you.
It's real cool stuff.
Since your some of the focus is on vibration, and some of the focus is on this and scientific data and this background, have you? And we can come back and talk. It'd be great to come back and bring you back when we talk about this. Have you watched any of the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch research that's been going on? It's a History Channel show where all kinds of weird paranormal stuff has happened, and they've brought in a astrophysicist and a couple other scientists, and they have been doing experimental data and repeatable experiments, and they have been getting repeatable results, which has always been a massive criticism of the study of the paranormal. Like, the UFO light, it's no big deal. It happened once. You can't make it do it again. Well, they're making it happen fairly regularly. And there's been a lot of really cool stuff in there, and spoilers. They think they may have found evidence of an actual Einstein-Rosen bridge wormhole, like between 31 feet above this place and 10,000 feet. And they're seeing like light shifts and focus shifts, and there's this weird 1.6 gigahertz frequency that keeps transmitting, and they can't find out where. And if you like that stuff and you have a science background, I highly recommend watching the show because the stuff they find is fascinating. Some of it's kind of like wild, and some of it is just them building the science, and they're like, something's here. So.
Yeah. Well, just imagine, right, if we could see the entire light spectrum. We only see 1%. Imagine if we could see gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays. I mean, just imagine how crazy this world would be. And, which again leads me to where we talked about local realism being false or not true technically. And there's, Lex Friedman has so many great science, or
Well, and
scientists, theorists
on
on that
that,
stuff too.
part of the reason I brought up the Skinwalker is a lot of what they've been doing is using infrared and FLIR to catch their data. So the stuff is not visible to the naked eye. It's not in our visual frequency, but they're using specialized cameras that see outside of our frequency, and that's how they're finding stuff, which is really
To make perfect
fascinating.
sense.
Which
Makes
ties right into
sense.
what you're talking
Yeah.
about, right? And also,
Well, I mean, if
we know dogs can see slightly outside of and cats can see slightly outside of what
Yeah.
we can see. And you often wonder why is the dog just staring at the thing in the corner, or the cat staring at the thing in the corner, and they're following it. And that's when we get into like ghosts and spirits and energy and all this fun stuff that we haven't really delved into yet. So
Yeah, and which is, yeah, I mean, and since we're on that
fascinating.
topic, it's very fascinating, and I wanted to just segue into since we're on Thoth, that he was, and I'll use a quote here, according to the Emerald Tablets. I think that is that he was a man that would walk amongst men, and was known to transfer his body into other humanoid bodies. So this is what's so interesting about this, that he talks about being in one body and then being in another body. And then he would transfer bodies, and he would leave these underneath the halls of Amenti, so underneath the Great Pyramid, which is interesting. So
are we talking about
like
reincarnation, or are we talking about like transferring of consciousness from one physical form to the other? Does it specify?
Question. So it does. So it talks about he being able to go through portals at that time. So we're talking about people that civilization that was probably 1,000,000 years ahead of us, or light years ahead of us, being able to transfer through portals. It talks about it was a multi-dimensional being that talked about being able to transfer his consciousness into other avatar bodies, which today, currently, what do we have out there? Neuralink, right? So he did this, in these tablets talk specifically, and I think, Daniel, we talked about this about 3 years ago. They found that right underneath the Great Pyramids, about a mile below, they found these, basically, they were like what I would call like these holy transfer portals, which was interesting. They were like these chambers. So he would basically use these chambers that were a mile deep, and he claimed to use them 100 times. And each time he used it, it would last up to 100 years. We're talking about being able to transfer his consciousness for over 100,000 years.
And that's the plot to X-Men Apocalypse. I mean, I'm not kidding. That's basically that's the story, right? Yeah.
So pretty interesting. And
I just had a thought experiment
3 years ago. This is just 3 years ago.
Little thought experiment that just went through my brain. If you had advanced enough technology and a better power source, there is no reason that you could not open an Einstein-Rosen bridge by waving your hand or flicking your little billion-year advanced iPhone and step through it and then step out somewhere else, right?
Right.
Mathematically, as we understand physics, that's possible. We just don't know how to do it, right? We don't have the energy output. We don't have the mechanical stuff to do it. But there's nothing that says that couldn't work, right? So I'm 100% with you that we don't know what happened before. There's a massive amount of lost history.
Yeah.
I'm struggling specifically with, I couldn't find the place that says they have this tablet that would let me, as an academic, go and look at it and see what language it was written in, where was it found, what's the as much as we criticize archaeology on this podcast, where was it dug up? What are the records tied to that? Is it not a fake? Because we can't carbon date Emerald.
Yeah.
That's the problem, right? So,
well, I also don't think it I don't think it's actually emerald. I don't think it was
Fair enough.
ever actually emerald. I think it just was the
Well,
color
and
emerald.
what I'm getting
Yeah.
at is some of this stuff can't really be carbon date. Like we can't carbon date stone, so that makes it
Right.
harder to
Well, I know, and
date stuff.
I think the history of this story, of this idea, is that this is it. This is the initial, and then we now have a lot of other
It's
information that is some that was earlier that he may or may not have had access to, but we've found stuff since then
Mm-hmm.
that is some of the same stories, something, and I think some things that were, from what I was able to see, I think that some of the stuff that's mentioned we now have proof of, or now have evidence of, that didn't exist before. So it, like, oh, okay, well, he said it there, and now we now have it somewhere else as
yeah,
well. But it's still very
and as an academia as well,
iffy.
I've tried to find holes in this stuff through different channels, through different outlets, through different resources, and it's all
And
it's fortunately for me, the truth is now setting me free from a mathematical standpoint, from a
that's
conscious
awesome.
standpoint.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And
So
I'm not trying to be critical of that.
yeah,
My
no, and
struggle my struggle from
it's
this comes
beautiful.
from a different
Hmm.
place. And when I
Hmm.
hear we have a translation or a transcription, so my background is in theology. I have a bachelor's in theology and I have a master's in divinity. So I've studied dead languages, and one of the things that most people don't understand, they just are not aware of, because it's not publicized, is like there's no ancient New Testament. Like the Greek New Testament that we translate to English or Greek or English or Italian or Aramaic or
Hmm.
whatever, that is not a book that we can point to that exists. It is a massive number of scrolls and scriptures and books. And, if you open up my Greek New Testament, there are pages where there's only like 5 lines, and then there's 90% of the page is annotations on all the different places where it's slightly different on the different scrolls, right? So
Hmm.
we have a group of theologians who get together like every 5 or 10 years and look for new data, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. We found something new, so we can revise this.
Hmm.
Like the oldest New Testament we have is like 1,000 years old, and that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and the Hebrew ones are a little bit better because they were better about keeping it. There's less deviation in the Hebrew scriptures that we have.
Got it.
Um,
Got it. Got it.
but
Yeah,
again, there's
which would
not
make
really
sense.
any that are that old because Rome was really good about sacking and burning stuff, and the Jewish people have been persecuted throughout their history, and their scrolls have been burned and like that.
Well, I mean, don't even
So,
get me started on the amount of fires that there have been in
oh God,
libraries
yes,
that we've just,
lost
every
data.
once in a while it's like, oh, let's burn this one
So
down, and then we'll
Yeah.
burn down the remnants of that one.
and that's
It,
that's where some of my struggle comes from, just from an academic
Mhm.
standpoint. In that, when somebody's like,
yeah.
"I have the manuscript," I'm like, "Okay, so is it the original, or no? It's a transcription or a translation." Okay,
Mhm.
where's the original, right? And it's not that
Right.
and it's not even that I think the person's lying so much as we need more than one academic to look at it and do the translation,
Mhm.
because when you go
Mhm.
from a dead language to a modern language, there's so much. And I'm going to give you an
Yeah.
example. Are you familiar with the story of the baptism of Jesus?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, okay. Most people is right.
Uh,
Jesus goes into the water, and the
mm,
heavens open, and the Spirit comes down and lands upon him like a dove. Right. Well, a more accurate translation is the fabric of reality was ripped asunder, and the essence of God slammed into him like a diving pigeon. That's
yeah.
an actual, more literal translation, which has a very different image to like what we get. And so when you get into translating languages and things like that, I mean, the math is easier, right? Because that's more fixed, right? When we see
Mhm.
Hmm.
geometry, we know we can measure it. But when I say when I say that's a pigeon, and you say no, that's a dove, and you say, and we're talking about the same thing, right? But now we have language gets weird. Sorry, go ahead.
It does get weird. I heard something interesting the other day that was, when we talk about all of these things, we talk about evidence and this they were talking about like physics and math, or not math, but physics and advanced science, and saying that, like, we keep wanting to say, like, well, we want to prove it, and we want it to be proven, and we want it to be, and they goes, the only thing that works with is math. Like, literal math is the only thing that you can prove definitively, because it's an equation. Everything else is just gathering enough data until you go, well, I guess that's what the answer is. And that we have to be willing to step away from the need for everything to be 100% solidly defined and confirmed. And we just have to go, like, with the best evidence I have right now, this is what it is.
Well,
and then when I find something new, I'll reassess.
And that's great, Daniel, because I think that's where we're heading as a society. Is we're heading there. We're heading there even more and more and more. And like Bill talked about, like, with you having that background in theology, this has kind of brought me full circle to knowing nothing in theology, to now saying, oh man, well, who in the hell is this God though? Because now what Daniel was saying is, now there's enough of this mathematical computation where now it's leading me to, like, oh shoot, like, this guy is like, man, all this stuff is like, even the stuff that they told me, like when I was in, like, at the University of Texas at Austin. My wife, now of 12 years, will tell you, if one, you believe in Jesus and all that stuff, I will let you know, just walk out now, because what we're fixing to tell you is going to be completely different from anything you've known. And that was a real shock for me, and it led me to a lot of, like, unknown. So through it all, I've gone through the depths of this, and this has been more of like a theology, I think, conversation. It's been a great conversation for me, because it's allowed me to really open up and to understand that, like what Daniel said, this is more of a connection to the theological component. But as an academia as well, Bill, I can tell you from the science side, there is so much that I can dive into, to the universe, to what is, to we are the all-seeing eye, the eye of Ra, which I'm actually going to get a tattoo of this esoteric thing that I've been wanting, but it is technically, the universe is you inverse, right? So we are all one. So 1 over is the inverse of the same number, right? So we are that one component. So the one inverse, and we go back to that gene code. We all have our unique identifier. So it's not just the universe, it's you inverse, right? So there's a whole nother dynamic here to the universe, and to, as we know now, the universal language is numbers and mathematics, and being able now that we can now measure consciousness, and we know that we just live in a light holographic matrix, and this all vibrates at a certain frequency. And we all know that, like, going back to that Nobel Prize that I keep badgering home, that we'll have another conversation about. I think, Bill, we'll all merge this stuff together, where I had my aha moment, where it blew my mind. And that's where I think the mic drop for me. Yeah.
And I want to touch on something else that you said throughout all this, because I don't want people to think that I'm being overly critical.
Yeah, I don't think you have.
Well, no. You mentioned somewhere along the line that, like, this was effectively, I'm not saying your words right, like a spiritual awakening in a sense.
Yeah,
and you have faith, and you are comfortable in this now, and everything kind of clicked for you, right? And
yeah, you're exactly right. That's a great way of putting it.
As someone who has been a pastor, right, and ministered to people, and over the years I've come to realize I'm much more of a universalist. I'm Christian, but I am much more of a universalist, in that I think that I'm not limited by Christianity has to be the only way that it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's missing for so many people, and I'm happy regardless of whether any of this is true or not, that you've found this and it's clicking for you, because there's this thing called faith that's important and hard to wrap your head around. There's also a difference between fact and truth. And in theology, we call it what's, like I read the Bible and is it true? Well, it depends. Is it true with a little t? Like, did it actually happen? Or is it true with a capital T, as it's an inherent truth? Love your neighbor. That's a capital T truth, We have hope, faith, and love. And the greatest of these is love. That is a capital T truth, right? And we can't quantify love mathematically, and we don't need to, right? But I think one of the things a lot of people are missing now, and all you have to do is look at the polls. Most Americans don't believe in God anymore because the church has failed them. And I'm saying church, capital C, like all of them, right?
Right.
And the religions that are thriving are those that are very strict. And like Islam is a growing and thriving religion, but it's got a very specific rule set, right? And some of the faiths that are rising are like, the fire and brimstone Baptist types and things like that. Because again, they have very strict rule set. It's easy to know right, it's easy to know wrong, and all this stuff ties back in together, right?
Exactly.
And some stuff we can prove historically, and some stuff we can't, and some stuff it doesn't effing matter whether we can or not, right?
Yeah. And to be determined, yeah.
Well, who cares if it works? If it works, whether Jesus was real or not, his message of treat people better and help each other and love each other is an important message, and we should carry that through. Whether Thoth was real or not, if he brought us mathematics and he's where all the geometry came from, and we've brought it along, great, that's important. I think some of us get hung up, like me, on all right, you're claiming there's a tablet, but you can't show me the tablet. I have a lot of trouble believing that there was a tablet. It doesn't necessarily mean the message is wrong, which may sound hypocritical, but that's kind of where I'm at with a lot of this stuff.
But I would just throw to you, show me the original Bible, please.
Well, and we can't, right?
I know.
We can't.
And so that's the same.
Now,
it's the same thing.
The thing that I can point to is we can trace the history of where these documents came from and the people who were making copies. And, oh, look, we know they burned the Library of Alexandria. Right. And the other problem with this is we have, like you said, the Vatican, we have the British Museum, we have the Smithsonian, and we know the Vatican doesn't let people into their archives. Right. That's choice. I think it's more bureaucratic inertia that keeps the other ones from letting people in, or they've just freaking lost it, or they dumped it in the river.
I don't think I have a feeling that there are things in the Vatican Library that would blow everybody's brains off that they don't
even know are there anymore. Yeah.
It's in a thing, in a tube, on a shelf with 1,000 other ones, and it's up at the very tip top.
And to be perfectly fair, some of these documents that could blow our mind, the next time somebody opens it, could disintegrate. Right?
Yeah, it could fall apart.
Because if it's not kept properly, a lot of this stuff. And again, this is why I think we're a species with amnesia. The only thing that sticks around is stone. The only thing that sticks around is stone, which is why, even though I'm not a huge fan of them, I'm really pissed that somebody blew up the Georgia Guidestones, right? Because somebody had taken the time to build something and put some messages on there. I don't agree with what necessarily was on there, but let's not blow up Iraq. Right? Let's not blow up these discoveries. Let's not raid the Iraq Museum and destroy this stuff so we can't research it. Yeah. Sorry. That's a soapbox of mine.
No. It's
because we know that history is
a good place to stop it.
Yeah. We know history's been lost. We've watched it happen in our lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
Well, and we have history telling us when it happened.
Yeah.
Imagine, and think about that. We have we have, I don't remember. I saw a little video where somebody sort of ran through all the library burnings over about 500 years, and there were like, a dozen of them or so.
Yeah.
Well, those are the dozen that we remember happening.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how many libraries that we didn't know existed that burned down before anybody even, and all the records of it. And who knows what was in there?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And then, we all know that, the Enuma Elish, I mean, that a lot of the canonized Bible today was copyrighted from there in the 7 tablets of creation. A lot of the stuff was in there, and not just in the current Bible, but in, other religions as well. So,
well, I think there is, as far as that's concerned, like the origins of those, like if you go back and look, there are some really core ideas that run a thread through almost every religion, and they some do and some don't, and they kind of mix and match. But there's like 5 or 6 of these big ideas that sort of carry through them all. That you have to at some point say like, okay, like how many times do I have to? The big one for me as a kid was always like, so you're telling me that every religion has a flood story, but there wasn't a flood? Like that doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. And then it turns out there was.
And just kind of to cap this off, we know religions evolve. All we have to do is look at, we have Judaism, which then had an outgrowth, which was Christianity, which then had a cousin, which was modern day Islam. They're all people of the book, and they should be able to get along.
Yeah.
But we've watched that in our written historical record. We've watched those create and evolve. So
yeah.
That's a good place to stop. Let's go ahead and call it there. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're gonna have to have you back again to do this again, man.
Absolutely.
This
been
is
a
too
pleasure.
fun.
Great.
Bill, Daniel, thanks. I know I've been waiting a long time to have this great discussion, and it's been great.
Well,
and
we will have you back
hopefully
soon.
seeing y'all again.